Police say that sometime between 9 last night and early this morning, the Bennett family was brutally attacked with a blunt instrument and a knife, probably this one found in the snow covering their front lawn. Dead are 27-year-old Bruce Bennett, his 26-year-old wife Debra, and one of their two daughters, 8-year-old Melissa. She and her mother were found in their bedrooms. A coroner says at least one of them, Melissa, appears to have been sexually assaulted. Bruce Bennett was found lying near a stairwell. Police say all of them were wearing their sleeping clothes.
Warning: what you are about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. 11 rings. Nobody picked up. The woman calling was 50 years old, and by the 9th ring she already knew. Not the details, just the shape of it. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like a missed call. It feels like a door that shouldn't be opened. She got in her car anyway. What she found inside that house would take 34 years, 3 states, and a piece of science that hadn't been invented yet to explain. Before we go further, this case involves the murder of a family. What happened to them is difficult to hear even without graphic detail, and we're not going to add any. If that's not what you're here for, no hard feelings. Catch the next file. Still with us? Tell us where you're watching from. And if cases like this are your thing, built on paperwork, patience, and the kind of detail work most true crime channels skip, subscribe. This one earns it. January 1984. Aurora, Colorado, a suburb east of Denver that was still mostly prairie a decade earlier. New construction, cheap mortgages, families who'd moved there specifically because nothing ever happened. Bruce Bennett was 27, a Navy veteran, studying most nights to become an air traffic controller, a job with zero tolerance for a wandering mind. His wife, Debra, was 26. They had 2 daughters, Melissa, 7, 2 days from her 8th birthday, and Vanessa, 3. Like most of their neighbors, the Bennetts sometimes left the garage door up overnight. Nobody thought about it. Why would they? On the morning of January 16th, Bruce's mother, Connie, couldn't get anyone on the phone. She drove over, let herself in with her own key. Bruce was found near the stairs. He hadn't gone down without a fight. Investigators would later determine the struggle moved through more than one room, more than one floor. Whoever came through that garage door met resistance and kept going anyway. Debra and Melissa were in the bedrooms. Melissa's injuries went beyond what her parents suffered. Investigators would later treat that detail as central to the case. Vanessa, 3 years old, was still breathing, barely. She was airlifted to Children's Hospital in Denver. The injuries were severe enough that doctors gave the family almost no reason for hope. She survived anyway. No forced entry, no murder weapon left behind, just boot prints in the snow, leading away from the house and disappearing into a street where, according to police, nobody had seen or heard a single thing worth reporting. Here's what almost nobody standing in that house that morning knew yet. This wasn't the first attack that month. It wasn't even the third. 12 days. 5 victims, 3 separate police jurisdictions, none of them talking to each other, because in 1984, there was no system built for that. January 4th. Kim and Jim Haubenschild were beaten with a hammer in their own Aurora home. Both survived. That same night, across town, Donna Dixon, 28, a flight attendant, pulled into her own garage after a grocery run and was attacked before she'd even gotten out of the car. She survived, but the attack left her seriously injured, and for years afterward she had no memory of it. Only the slow work of relearning things she used to do without thinking. January 10th. Patricia Smith, 50, an interior decorator who shared her Lakewood home with her daughter and grandchildren, was attacked in broad daylight in the middle of lunch. She didn't survive. The hammer, this time, was left at the scene. January 16th. The Bennetts. 11 days after that, in Kingman, Arizona, nowhere near Colorado, a man named Roy Williams was attacked in his sleep with a 25-pound piece of rock. He lived, and this time, police caught someone. His name was Alex Christopher Ewing, 23 years old, a drifter with a criminal record already stretching back to 1979. Arrests scattered across Florida and California. He'd gotten a Colorado driver's license the previous summer. Proof, in hindsight, that he wasn't just moving through the state. He was living in it. Nobody in Kingman had any reason yet to connect him to a family in Aurora he'd never been formally tied to. If you want the kind of true crime that actually follows the paperwork, instead of skipping to the ending, this is the part where subscribing means something. We're just getting started. Ewing sat in custody in Arizona for less than a year. Overcrowding got him transferred to a detention center in Utah. In August 1984, during a prisoner transport back to Kingman, deputies stopped for a bathroom break in Henderson, Nevada. Ewing ran. That same night, he broke into a nearby home and beat a couple, Nancy and Chris Berry, with an axe handle. He was caught 2 days later near Lake Mead. A Nevada court gave him 110 years. The Arizona case quietly disappeared. For the next 3 decades, that was the end of it. A name in a Nevada prison file. No connection to Colorado. No connection to a case that, back in Aurora, one detective refused to let go cold. Stephen Connor had been among the first officers at the Bennett house in 1984. He kept working the file on his own time, long after most departments would have let it die in a filing cabinet. DNA testing barely existed as a tool in 1984, mostly theoretical, confined to research papers. By 2002, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation could finally confirm what Connor suspected. The same person killed Patricia Smith and the Bennett family. Same DNA. 2 scenes. Still no name. A DNA profile without a comparison sample is just an extremely precise description of a stranger. So investigators tried something newer. Around 2016, they had a composite image built, not from a witness, but from the DNA itself, predicting what the attacker likely looked like. They also brought in a forensic genealogist, using the same technique that would later crack the Golden State Killer case in California. Working backward through genetic family trees, the genealogist narrowed the search to a single surname, Ewing. Still not a match, just a name attached to a shape in the dark. The break came from somewhere nobody investigating this case had any reason to be watching. Nevada prison policy. In 2013, the state began requiring convicted felons to submit DNA. In 2016, that requirement was extended backward, to men already convicted, years before DNA testing existed as evidence. Ewing's sample went into the system in the summer of 2018. The match came back in a day. When Colorado investigators finally sat across from him, they showed Ewing a photo from Patricia Smith's crime scene. He recoiled, stared at it, then said the only thing he'd say across 2 separate interviews: "There's got to be a mistake." He confirmed he'd lived in the Denver area in 1984, working construction and plumbing jobs. He offered no explanation for how his DNA ended up at either scene. Colorado issued a warrant, 13 counts, 6 of first-degree murder, 2 for each Bennett victim. Ewing's legal team fought extradition for almost 2 years, all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which declined to hear it. In February 2020, he was flown to Colorado in a state jet and driven straight to a jail cell in Arapahoe County. The Bennett trial opened in the summer of 2021. 25 witnesses, including Vanessa Bennett herself, now an adult, describing fragments of a night she was far too young to remember clearly. The case turned almost entirely on one witness, CBI analyst Yvonne Woods. She testified the DNA match was so precise, the odds it belonged to anyone else on the planet were roughly 1 in 3 nonillion, a number with 30 zeros in it. So large she had to spend part of her testimony just explaining what certain even means at that scale. The defense had one real card to play, and they played it hard. Of 31 fingerprints recovered from the Bennett home, not one belonged to Ewing. They argued 1984-era investigators handled evidence without gloves. Decades of storage and retesting, they said, left real room for contamination. The jury deliberated across 2 days. At one point, they told the judge they were deadlocked. They came back anyway. Guilty. On every count. Judge Darren Vall didn't soften the sentencing. He called the 12-day spree an unspeakable orgy of violence and handed down 3 consecutive life sentences. Enough, under 1984 law, to guarantee Ewing dies in prison, regardless of parole eligibility. The Patricia Smith case took longer. The first trial, in October 2021, ended in mistrial after the defense requested a competency evaluation. It went to trial again the following spring. This time, During proceedings, Ewing addressed the court directly, unprompted, insisting the system was rigged against him, that he'd tried to point investigators toward other suspects and been ignored. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty again. A fourth life sentence, stacked on the first three. Vanessa Bennett is in her 40s now. She lives in Arizona, goes by a married name, and still carries a metal plate in her skull from a night she was 3 years old for. At sentencing, she told the court that what she lost that night wasn't just her family, it was her sense of trust in people. Full stop. Connie Bennett, in her late 80s by the time it was finally over, said it wasn't closure exactly, just something she'd learned to carry. What actually solved this case wasn't a witness. Ewing never confessed to anything. It was a change to Nevada prison policy, a paperwork decision made by people who had never heard of the Bennett family, applied retroactively 13 years later, that happened to reach exactly the right file. That's how most cold cases actually end, not a breakthrough interrogation. A database update, and a lab tech running a match nobody was expecting to hit that day. If this one held your attention, tell us in the comments which detail got you. The fingerprints that didn't match, or the phone that rang 11 times. Subscribe if you want more cases handled this way, fact by fact, link by link. See you at the next file.